So Plaid Identity Verification can be used in any situation where you want to verify that your user is who they say they are. One of the most common cases is in like a money movement app when you're using it alongside a program like Plaid Monitor to make sure that your app is compliant with all anti-money laundering regulations. But you can use it in any situation you want to make sure your user is who they say they are. Maybe in like a social networking or dating app. Or if you are going to build some kind of loan application app and you want to make sure of your user's identity. Or in this case, my theoretical e-commerce app where people are buying and selling used cars. So I'll give you a quick run through of this app and show you what it's actually doing on today's video. Stick around. So what I'm going to do today is get this Quickstart app up and running so you can see what it looks like to actually run identity verification in, a real working sample. So the first thing I'm going to do is head on over to the Plaid dashboard. And I have identity verification here on the left in my list of products. If you don't, you can request it here from this products page or, talk to your friendly neighborhood Plaid representative who might be able to get it up and running for you quickly. So let me get on back here and I'm going to open up this panel. Now you notice I have the option to switch between production and sandbox up here. Production obviously runs against, real life identity verification data sources, and you can use it to actually identify yourself. In this situation, I'm going to run in sandbox, which is really only used for testing and development purposes, and only verifies the identity of one single person, Leslie Knope, and you'll be seeing a lot more of her later. So I'm going to go ahead and, look at all these test templates. I'm going to go ahead and create a new template. Now these templates are basically sort of the flow that you want your user to go through when they're verifying their identity. So I will give it a name. We'll call it car buying sample. I will select our industry, which I guess will count as e-commerce. I'll get back to this autofill data option because it is pretty neat. But for now, let's see, our company name, I'll call it Baby You Can Buy My Car. You'll need to add a privacy policy link. In my case right now, I'm just going to link to Plaid's. AML screening is if you want to screen your customers against various government watch lists to make sure you're staying compliant with all local regulations. I'm not going to add it here, but definitely something you might want to look at. I will keep this checked. And for now, I'm going to ignore this financial account matching. If we were actually going to be, connecting users to various bank accounts, this would be used to help make sure that the identity you get from your user when they go through the IDV process matches what you might retrieve from their bank account when they link to it. On the design flow, we can go ahead and specify a color. I'll go with, green. Green's nice. You can add a logo. I'm going to skip that for now. You can sort of specify whether you want your background to be this full green or just neutral. The workflow tab here goes into a little more detail around what your user is going to be expected to do when they verify their identity. I'm going to keep most of these options to the default, although let's look at this template here. So right now, what we're saying is your verification behavior is going to be lightning only. Lightning only is basically a flow where you'll go ahead and fill out some information about yourself, verify your phone number through SMS, and we'll go ahead and make sure that the information that we're able to retrieve from our various data sources matches what the user entered. Just because I want to sort of show you some more options in this demo, I'm going to go ahead and fall back to documentary verification. This means if something doesn't look quite right when I go through the Lightning flow, we'll go ahead and ask the user to upload some ID documents, like driver's license, that sort of thing. Selfie behavior, this is kind of neat. This asks the user to capture a selfie after they've gone through the documentation flow. We'll go ahead and record the user taking a selfie and make sure that this actually does seem like a real person and that the person in the selfie matches the picture that's in the document. In Sandbox, we don't actually do the selfie check. So even if I pick one of these options, I'm not going to see it in this particular flow, which is too bad because it is kind of neat. I'll go ahead and confirm changes. And again, this is set up for all countries. You can go ahead and create new workflows and assign those different workflows to different countries. Depending if some countries you feel like you need to set up a different flow, you can go ahead and do that here. I'm going to skip that for now. Rule sets allow me to set up different rules, again, specified for different countries if you'd like. Let's say how closely you would like the information that the user entered to match what's in our records. In our case, we're saying all this has to match exactly and the address has to be pretty close. Or I guess, all this has to match exactly, including their phone number. If the user hits either one of these rules, we can go ahead and say that, yes, their identity has been confirmed. Risk rules allow me to basically specify how much riskiness I want to accept in each of these different categories before perhaps rejecting the user. For example, in email risk, does this look like a throwaway email? Have I seen this email, out on the internet for a while? Those sorts of things. Now, I am going to actually do one thing here, which is I'm going to set my network risk to high. And the reason I'm doing that is network risks looks for things like, is the user attempting to verify their identity multiple times from the same device or the same IP address? In my case, because I'm going to be running a demo where I am verifying my user from the same IP address multiple times, I'll actually get rejected probably the second or third time I run this, and I don't want that happening in the middle of this demo. So I'm setting this to high risk for me, but I would probably set this back to medium risk before I launch. Now that all this is done, I'm going to go ahead and click Publish Changes. And I have a template that I'm all set up to use. So now that this is set up, I'm actually going to show you a common way of using identity verification for a lot of customers that are first getting started with it, which is not to integrate it into my app at all. Let's say you flag some customers on your end that maybe seem suspicious, and your customer support team wants to do some work to sort of verify their identity before letting them into your app. What you can do is you can go ahead and click this Create Verification link. And so what this is going to do is this is going to create a link that your customer service team can then send to your customers and say, hey, please fill this out to go ahead and verify your identity. It's sort of a hosted link that we host on behalf of your application. So what you'll probably want to do here is add a customer reference. This could be the internal user ID you use for this customer, something so that you can, tie this in to your own application when the customer is done. So I'll call this, customer 1. We also highly recommend adding an email. And again, this goes back to sort of that risk level I was talking about earlier. We can look at this email that belongs to your customer, and we can look at things like, has this email been used on legitimate sites before? Does it seem like, it belongs to a person? We do generally recommend that you verify this email before adding it in. That's sort of best practice, but if you don't, it's still okay to add it. So I'm going to just add test@example.com. And I'm going to go ahead and create a verification link. And so what you're going to have here is a big link that you can send to your customer and say, hey, go ahead and fill this out to complete the identity verification process. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's open an incognito window, and I'm going to go ahead and pretend like I am this customer and fill this out. So for starters, I'll go ahead and just sort of show you the typical Lightning flow. Again, because we're in sandbox mode, there is only one legitimate user that we are allowed to be, and that is this person, Leslie Nope. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of fill out this information as it's displayed here. We will send a verification code to this phone number. I will pretend like I've received it. And I'll go ahead and add in my address. I'll go ahead and provide the last 4 of my social security number. This is something you can configure within the template editor if you'd like. And it looks like we are successfully verified. So I'm going to go ahead and close this page as my user. And then your customer support team can go ahead and look in the Past tab, and it looks like this user has gone ahead and verified their identity, right? And you can go ahead and see a lot more detail about this user. Like they've gone ahead and verified their phone number. And then we've noticed that, their name, their date of birth, their address, all of that matches up with the records that we have based on the verified phone number that we're able to get. We verified their tax ID number. And then down here is a bunch of risk checks that we've done. We've noticed that, the user is using an incognito window, but we decided that's low risk. We have noticed that this user has tried to verify their identity multiple times from the same device. And, that is a high risk. That's why I had to disable this earlier, because otherwise our IDV attempt probably would have been rejected here. There's a bunch of other stuff it's doing behind the scenes. I'm probably underselling it based on sort of all these risk factors. Under behavior risk, we're looking at, has the user filled out their information in a way that a normal user who's familiar with their data would have? Does this user appear to be part of a fraud ring? Does it look like this is a bot, or, is this a user actually filling out this stuff manually? And based on all this, I guess we've decided that this is a verified user and they do not appear to be fraudulent. So there you go. And so now that we've seen what the process looks like, let's actually go ahead and show you what it looks like inside an app. So I'm going to go ahead and head on over to GitHub. And I'm going to grab our IDV Quickstart application. And what I'm going to do is let's open up a terminal window. I'll go ahead into my develop folder, and let's go ahead and git clone this repository into, and we'll call it IDV card video. All right, good. My cat is reminding me that I need to run npm install. And I'll go ahead and open this repo in VS Code. So now that I'm in my app, I'm going to go ahead and do a couple things here. First, I'm going to copy my env template to just .env. And this is where I'm going to go ahead and just copy a few API keys from the Plaid dashboard. So let's see here. To developers, keys. I'll grab my client ID. And I'll grab my sandbox secret. Don't look. I'm going to make sure that I'm in the sandbox environment. And for my template ID, I need to supply the template of what I created in the identity verification panel. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. And under integration, that's probably the easiest way to grab the template ID. So I'll copy that, paste it into here. I'm going to go ahead and ignore this for now, but if I have time, I'll get back to this later. So I'm going to go ahead and run npm run watch to start my application running on port 8000. And then I'll just go ahead and bring it up. And here we go. Here's an application. So I'll go ahead and create an account. I'll call it user2. And good old test@example.com. I'll agree to the terms of service and create an account. And so here I am in this awesome programmer art UI flow. But we can pretend that, as our application, after users create an account, maybe we do want them to verify their identity, before they go ahead and list a car for sale or that sort of thing. So maybe this might not happen right after you create an account, but, at some point when the user sort of indicates their intent that, yes, I'd like to go ahead and list a car for sale. So I'm going to click right now this verify my identity button. And I'm going to go through a similar flow as before. I'm going to do something a little different here. I'll still call myself Leslie Nope. And I'll verify that phone number and my address. But then I'm going to get my social security number wrong, or at least it's not going to match what's in our records. So when I do this, that is going to cause the Lightning flow to fail. And what we're going to do is, because I said, okay, well, use the documentation flow as a backup if Lightning flow fails. And so now it's presenting me with a QR code where I can go ahead and present pictures of official documents using my phone. So I'm going to record my phone, and hopefully through the magic of video editing, you'll be able to see what's going on it. So I'm going to go ahead and with my camera, I'm going to go ahead and follow this link. And so now this is taking me to a flow on my phone where it's going to take pictures of an official ID. And here it's listing what my IDV template has listed as acceptable forms of ID. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and upload my driver's license. Now, the way this works on sandbox mode, you don't actually need to take a picture of a driver's license. Any picture you take, no matter what it is, will be interpreted as a legitimate driver's license belonging to Leslie Knope with the address that I specified earlier. So one thing is, if you do want to test this, like, oh, I failed lightning flow, but I passed the documentation flow, don't mess with the name or the address. Do like what I did and maybe get the social security number wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, I'd like to take a picture of my driver's license. And it's going to go ahead and give me some instructions for taking a picture of it. Now, I'm not going to use my driver's license. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a picture of this weird cat toy that my son decided to give me for Father's Day. That looks good. That definitely looks like a legitimate driver's license. I'm going to say continue. And now we want a picture of the back. Perfect. And it's going to go ahead and upload these. And now you can see both on my phone and on the website that I have verified my identity. And I'm finished. And it's gone ahead and made a call to the server to say, hey, what is our user's name? And so that's how we know that I am now Leslie Knope. If we look in the debug tools, by the way, this is a call where we can fetch information about our user's most recent IDV attempt. This, as you can see here, is for debugging purposes. Normally, you would never share this information with your client. But, you know, in our case, just so that you can sort of see what kind of information you might get back from one of these fetch calls to our API, this actually hits the server, has the server, you know, make a call to identity verification. And we show you a quick summary of what happened in here. But actually, if you open up Chrome DevTools, you can see we give you much more information about the user's identity verification attempt, right? This is all information that you could see as well in the dashboard. But again, you know, this is something that your server could go ahead and, you know, talk to our server and get this information if you need it. And again, you know, this not only shows up here using our API call, but if you go back to the dashboard and we look at, you know, again, users that have passed the test, here is our second Leslie Knope. And you can see, you know, oh yeah, lightning verification failed. The social security number didn't match up. But it looks like this very legitimate driver's license did actually match with, you know, Leslie Knope with this. Oh, I'm sorry, I think I misspoke. It doesn't match the address. It actually matches the date of birth. So make sure you get the birthday right. And again, here's the number of checks that it goes through to make sure this driver's license does match the input that I put in. You know, is there a portrait? Does the image look right? Obviously, you know, we'll check and make sure this looks like a legitimate driver's license. Has it expired? All of that sort of thing. So this is some pretty good progress. We have verified that our user is who they say they are. You might have noticed it is a number of, you know, decent number of fields to fill out. And you might be wondering if there are ways you can, you know, reduce the friction and make it even easier for a user to pass an IDV check. And there is. So let me show you a couple different ways. So let me sign out and we'll call this a user. We'll create a new user hybrid. And so one thing you might want to do is, you know, when your user is signing up for your app, chances are they're giving you some of this information that we are already asking for. Like, you know, maybe they are giving you their name or their address or that sort of thing. And, you know, rather than have them fill it in again when they go ahead and, you know, complete the IDV flow, your application can send that to us before they start the IDV process. So that's what this pre-fill some data button does. We're going to pretend like our user has already, you know, given us like their name and, you know, perhaps their mailing address when they've signed up for this application. And we're going to give that information to Plaid so that they don't have to fill it out again when they try to verify their identity. So I'll click this button. And so we're going to pretend that our user has given us this information when they created an account, and we're going to go ahead and give it to Plaid. So that now when we click the verify my identity flow, you'll notice that there are fewer steps to fill out. So I'm just going to supply my phone number. You know, you'll notice we're not asking the user for their name anymore. Once I verified this, again, we're not asking the user for their mailing address. We're just asking them for their social security number. And just like that, our user is identified with much fewer fields to fill out. The other thing we can do is if we go back to our template and open up the editor, I'm going to go ahead and check this attempt to autofill customer PII box. And so what this is going to do is when the user verifies their phone number, and we've determined that there's nothing suspicious going on with this user's phone number, it hasn't changed accounts recently or anything like that, we'll go ahead and take what information we already know is associated with this phone number and essentially fill it in on behalf of the user, so there's less information they need to fill in manually. So let me show you. We'll create a new user called user autofill. Create another account. I'm not going to pre-fill in some data. I'm just going to go ahead and go with the verify my identity flow. I will add my phone number, my date of birth, receive a code. I will enter in this code again to, verify that this device still belongs to me. I still have it in my possession. And we've gone ahead and said, oh, great, look, we found out that this person with this phone number, we already have your address and your social security number on file, so you don't need to fill it out. Now, I can go ahead and update that if I'm like, oh, I no longer live at that address or that sort of thing. But, for most users, they can click confirm and continue. And again, I'm successfully verified. Actually, I'm going to break into my screencast here to show you a third way you can reduce user friction, and that's with the Remember Me feature. Now, this only works on production, which is why you're not seeing it in the rest of my screencast. But the way this feature works is that when a user in the United States completes their identity verification process, Plaid will ask them if they want us to remember them for next time. So, let's assume they say yes, like I'm doing here. Then the next time this user goes through the identity verification flow in any application that uses Plaid IDV, and I know I'm using the same application here, but most likely they'd run into this when signing into other apps, the flow would look a little something like this. I'll enter my phone number and verify that, yes, it still belongs to me. Plaid will again check to make sure this number hasn't changed owners recently and nothing else suspicious is going on. And then it'll say, oh, wait, I already know about you because you checked that Remember Me box in this other application. And so what Plaid will do is it'll say, hey, is it okay if we share this information we already have about you with this application? Now, I have the option to edit that information if any of it is out of date, or I can click share. And just like that, my identity has been confirmed with this other application. And all I really had to do here as a user was verify my phone number. Now, to get this working, you just need to make sure you have this attempt to autofill customer PII from the Remember Me profile option checked. Like I said, this isn't available on Sandbox, so you won't see it unless you're editing your production workflow. But that's it. Okay, back to your regular demo. Now, this is not a full tutorial video, but if you want a quick summary of what's going on when the user goes through this IDV process, let me show you real quick. So when the user clicks their Verify My Identity button on the client goes ahead and makes a call to this Generate Link Token for IDV endpoint. And what this does is this creates a link token like it does for most Plaid products. Notice that we're listing identity verification as the only product. We're specifying that template ID. We're also including the user object, and that contains two values. The client user ID is basically my application's internal user ID for this user, so I can identify them later when I get that information back from the service, as well as the email if it's available. So I go ahead and generate a link token and pass that back up to the client. On the client side of things, once I receive this token, I run this start link IDV function. And again, this opens link like you would typically do for any Plaid product. When the user is done or exits early, we're going to grab the session ID and we're going to pass that down to our server, telling our server that the user is done with their IDV session, or at least, done for now, right? And that just goes ahead and calls IDV complete on our server with this session ID. And well, what happens in IDV complete? We make this call to update user record for IDV session. And this is basically where our server is fetching information from Plaid's identity verification service. And we're basically just doing this with this simple identity verification get call, passing in the session ID. Now, again, you'll get the session ID from Link as the user is going through their process. If you have set your application up for webhooks, you can also receive this as a webhook, either as the user completes, every individual step in the process, or when they're done and their session has been marked as verified or failed. We can go ahead and look at the status and say, well, if it doesn't equal success, well, maybe they haven't fully verified their identity yet. And so we'll, make a note of that in our database. But, otherwise we can go ahead and mark that, yes, our user has been verified, and, go ahead and populate any information we want about the user based on what we get from this call to Plaid IDV. And that, in essence, is all I need to do to implement IDV within an application. If you're wondering about that hybrid process where I go ahead and supply some information ahead of time, you can go ahead and find that in the prefill IDV data endpoint. This is obviously just hard-coded in. You would go ahead and grab that based on, what your user has saved in, your user's table up until this point. And so I go ahead and pass this into a identity verification create call, and this creates a new session. And so you want to do this before the user starts to verify their identity. And if you want a lot more detail on how any of this works, our README is pretty detailed. And we talk about exactly what happens when this application runs, how it works, all that stuff. And I encourage you to, check out the README because I spent a lot of time writing it. I wanted to show you a couple other ways that you can run this IDV process. These are maybe a little less common, but still might be useful in certain situations. So if you were a fan of that process I showed you earlier, where you just generate a URL in the dashboard and send that off to the user for them to complete, but you don't want to manually go to the dashboard and click that button, you can generate a shareable URL, right? This is something that our API supports. And again, clicking this link will get you to the hosted flow that is not inside our app, where a user can then go ahead and complete the IDV process. It's probably rare for you to do this within a client app itself, but you might have your own application or service on your end that generates these URLs automatically that you want to share with your users. And that's how you do that. The last way I'm going to show you is there may be some situations where you want to completely build the front end. You want to have it completely branded on your end. You just want to take all that data when you're done and send it to Plaid to complete the identity verification process. And so that is this server only verification button. So I'm going to show you what this is doing. Is this is making a call on the server saying, hey, let's just pretend I got all of this information already from the user, and it sends it off to Plaid. I'll simulate receiving a webhook back from the Plaid service. And we've gone ahead and been verified. Now, one thing I should note about the way this works is you need to use a different IDV template. In my case, I've created one called server only to support the server only flow. And I did two important things in this template. The first is that I unchecked SMS verification. I only recommend doing this if you yourself have gone through the process of verifying the user's phone number, right? If you have done that, perhaps because that's the way users are signing into your app, then you can go ahead and turn this off. But you need to turn this off for a server only flow because obviously we can't send users SMS messages during that time. The other thing you're going to need to do is under your workflow, you're going to want to create a workflow that is Lightning only. Again, in a server to server flow, we can't ask the user to take a picture of their driver's license or take a selfie. So I had to go ahead and create a new template. I had to grab that ID, and I actually added that here in my Lightning only, no SMS ID. So specifically for that server to server flow, you would need to use a different template than what you might normally use for identity verification. And so there you go. That's the basic summary of Plaid Identity Verification. If you do have access to the IDV product, I encourage you to go ahead and download this Quickstart app yourself, give it a try, look through the code, and you can see how we've implemented each of these user flows. So hope this was useful. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to check out the documentation for anything that has changed since I made this video. It is a quickly evolving product, and I will see you soon on another exciting video. Bye.